We'll slide down.
Yeah, we'll slide down.
Tiny
Yeah,
dance.
slide down.
I'm gonna go with that as a no.
She might be asleep.
She could just be ignoring me. It's possible.
Looks like she's in a safe space.
Bob, is that because we're not live yet, potentially?
Says we're on there.
It says on air
She-
now.
Oh, can you hear us?
No, I
Yes,
could
I
hear
can.
you.
Oh,
when
good,
we were
okay.
live. Okay.
All right, Bob, we're ready to go whenever.
You're live.
Excellent. Okay. Well, good evening and welcome to the March 1st meeting of the Elementary School Building Committee. I'll quickly run through our agenda and then we will get started. We have new business. We have approval of meeting minutes to do. I don't think we have any invoices at this point unless I missed them. Okay. We'll do a quick recap of recent presentations we did to the school committee and select board regarding our preferred schematic option. And then Vertex and Perkins Eastman will walk us through a discussion on the preferred schematic report. And we will vote to approve the PSR to submit to the MSBA tomorrow. We'll then review an updated project schedule and talk about our meetings and next steps. And then we will adjourn. Target to adjourn will be by 8 o'clock. With that, we will go ahead and get started. We always open with public comment, but as per usual, we're a little light on audience members tonight, so if anybody does come for public comment, we can revisit it at that time. So we'll move right along to approval of meeting minutes. We have two sets of meeting minutes that were included kind of on the later side in the packet. First, we have the meeting minutes for the ESBC meeting of February 7th. Does anyone have any changes, edits, suggestions for those? Okay. Hearing none, I will be right on
I
it,
will
Mike.
move
Actually,
minutes
I
to
do.
February 7th.
Hold on,
we
Leah
have-
does. I always forget, forgot there's a delay.
Yeah, my last name is misspelled.
Oh,
Sorry
okay,
about that.
all right.
Good catch.
So we'll get that corrected.
Every time or once?
Let's see. Every time it looks like.
Probably just spell it the same way.
No, I use copy paste because I can
Should
do it.
bring that up, right? Scrivener's error. I'll move the minutes of February 7th as amended, Mr. Chairman.
Perfect. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Motion by Mike, second by Tiffany. We do have, Leah is participating remotely tonight, so we will have to do this as a roll call vote. And we'll start with Leah.
Aye.
Jagrut?
Aye.
Bill?
Yes.
Yes,
Mike?
sir.
Yes.
Tiffany? And I'm a yes. And I didn't skip Jen.
No, I am not
I
feeling
just like to
left
get
out.
that in the record.
What number does that add up to?
What was it counting?
3, 4, 5,
6. Okay.
Fire today.
Was
So-
that both minutes or just the one?
Nope, we get
Just
one at a
that's
time.
2-7.
And so February 13th, any questions, comments, suggestions, or misspellings?
Unfortunately, I did a save as, so I probably spelled it wrong in that one as well.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we will edit for the correct spelling of Leah's name. Any other changes? No. Okay, so I would seek a motion for approval of the February 13th, 2023 minutes as amended.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mike, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jagrut. And we'll go roll call again. Leah?
Aye.
Jagrut?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
Tiffany?
Yes.
And I am a yes. So both meeting minutes are approved unanimously, 6-0. Next on our agenda is a quick recap of our presentations to the school committee and the select board. I'll kick that off, but certainly anybody who was there, please feel free to add. We presented to the school committee before the February break about our preferred schematic option. Tiffany and I did the bulk of the presentation, talking about our process that we went through, the selection criteria, with particular focus, detailed drill down on traffic and cost. We repeated the same presentation to the select board. I think both meetings were fairly similar in their characteristic, in that there were not a lot of questions. There was not a lot of, honestly, not a ton of commentary at either one. And both boards endorsed our selection.
It was very positive, and we received good feedback about the design specifically. And then I think, the select board wants us to keep in mind just the cost, being sure that we're making the right fiscal decisions for our town on behalf of our community. And they also wanted us to continue to provide updates regarding the efficiencies in terms of net zero achievability and sustainability. And they encourage us to continue to work with the sustainability committee, the green committee. So we'll continue to do that, and we'll be sure in terms of like updating the community over time that we still have our community events and outreach, and that's something we have been trying to do and will continue to try to do. But they thought we should keep that in mind.
And I should note too that both boards significantly complimented the work of this committee, both in terms of the thoroughness of the process, but also the clarity of communication, which was nice to hear on both occasions. And then, special thank you to Vertex and Perkins Eastman for putting together the presentation for Tiffany and I. It certainly made it easier for us to be effective there.
And I think it goes worth noting that, the presentation you both gave was so easy to follow along. It was very structured and organized, and I think you're being a little bit humble by saying, it was positive. It was very well received, and I kind of listened with an ear of not knowing anything, and I could follow everything you said. So thank you both for how you presented it, and I think that's why it was approved so quickly, because it made sense.
Thank you.
So one thing that has come to my attention since the select board meeting, I guess there are people who haven't been following ESBC2 or school committee, because I heard a lot of, oh my God, the cost is, 3 times Marathon's cost. That's a lot of money. So I think as well as we've done with communication, we might have to find different avenues, because it was a new reaction despite the fact that we've been communicating so much.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Look, I think we're going to have to continue to communicate, and I think that barring discovering anything new, I think the two biggest topic areas that we're going to have to continue to focus on are the cost and why it does cost significantly more, and the potential traffic impacts. But I think the more opportunities we have to talk about that in any public forum we can find, I think the better off we will be. I don't think I mentioned this at this meeting, but we do have reserved time in the report section of annual town meeting. So we'll be able to give a presentation there as well that'll probably feel pretty similar to the one that we gave. So we'll continue to find other channels.
Yesterday evening at the select board, there was a question about reimbursement, which was helpful that Jeff was available to support us with that question. But I think connected to cost, we'll want to be forthcoming about how the reimbursement is shaping up as we get closer and have more specific information about how many points we have toward specific reimbursement to the town, because I do think that will play a major role.
That question came up at the school committee too, actually, how the reimbursement structure works and whether it's all at the end or if it's over the course of the project, and a couple people brought up those questions as well.
Yeah, so it is over the course of the project. The prior MSBA from a decade and a half ago would do it all at the end. It'd be a big reimbursement, but they do it monthly. which is the way it was under the Marathon project, where they will reimburse essentially 60 days in arrears. You'll pay the invoice, you'll submit it, and you'll get reimbursed. So it's like a 2-month delay cycle, essentially. And we can talk about, the conversation was timely, so today I put together the total project budget in the MSBA's updated format. So this is hot off the presses, and I will present that to you tonight, where the effective rate might go and how we can help influence that, with some decisions we make, moving forward too.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay. Then we're moving on to review and discussion of the draft preferred schematic report. So with that, I will turn it over to Perkins and Vertex. You're fine.
All right, so tonight's presentation, we have an update on the design. So at your last meeting, you voted the option at the back of the site that wasn't quite fully drawn. And so they've updated that drawing that was circulated out and presented at both the committees. And there's a refinement of that tonight that the design team is looking to put in the MSBA submission. So it's a fine tuning of that floor plan of the preferred option, and Bob will go over that. I'm going to walk you through the total project budget, which will be a lot of numbers and a lot of complex formulas. Tonight's meant to just be a high level kind of understanding of it. Tonight's not the final numbers. That'll happen in September when we submit the final schematic design. So this is to answer some of those questions we heard at the other committees about what is the reimbursement and how do we fine tune that. And then from there, I've asked the design team to present about LEED, so the Leadership in Energy and Efficient Design. We've talked about the sustainability goals. The MSBA program will have us register with LEED, but we haven't actually shown you the checklist and kind of walk you through that. That is part of this report, so I did want that to get into your view before we vote the approval tonight for the submission to go forward. So with that, I guess I'll turn it to Bob. He'll cover the design, and then Dan's doing LEED, and then I'll do cost.
Sure. So what you're seeing on the screen is the site plan. It's unchanged from what was developed leading up to the PSR and the most recent building committee meeting. What we did do is just start to list or track on the site plan what the program elements are for the site. I think it's important to see that, and it kind of can help community members understand what we're talking about as far as the quantity of queues. And this talks about the program. So one of the things that we'll be adding to this is we exceed the queues on the site. So we want to show, what the totals are that can be accommodated. Next slide just zooms in. Again, nothing has changed here. This is really here for reference. As we go forward into schematic design, this is diagrammatic, this is feasibility. It shows all the program. We'll certainly have plenty of time to not only get into the detail, but to also talk about how things may shift or change. But we know that this is a proof of concept as far as how the site can work and how the program can fit. Next.
So just on that slide, so the roadways themselves may shift a little because right now they're in the wetlands buffer, right? So we would probably in the upper portion where it says the word site plan east, and at the bottom where you kind of come in off 147, those sections of the road here, we may not have it as a straight path, because we're going to be balancing that, not wanting to fill more than 5,000 square feet. So that shifting those roadways slightly will allow us to keep below those thresholds, which would have other trigger and costs ramifications if we're over that 5,000.
So as Jeff had mentioned, what I did want to focus on is the floor plan. What you're seeing here is what was put together for the most recent building committee meeting. It was the concept that was voted of the 3-wing plan located on the eastern portion of the site. As we've been going through and preparing for the PSR submission, one of the things that we do is we go through again all of the educational program, all of the details that are written into that program, and we actually respond in that submission to the MSBA with what is the architectural outcome of that. So simple things like if we're talking about a warm and welcoming entry as being one of the goals, well, what does that mean? We we translate it into, it means daylight, it means views, it means, you know, the visibility of programs. So categorically throughout the educational program, you'll see in the submission that there's an architectural response. That also afforded us the opportunity that as this was put together relatively quickly as the preferred concept, to unpack it a little and make sure that we're meeting all of those educational program objectives. And we are grossly, but what we found is there are some relationships of spaces that we needed to move or shift around, and there were some advantageous changes as well that will lead to a better building. So if you look at the media center and you look at the music wing, those are two areas that we thought there was an opportunity to make an improvement. The music classrooms, as you can see where they're located now in this pretty quick concept, are en route to an academic cluster of classrooms. Acoustically, you know, there's a lot of treatment and things that can be done, but in a perfect world, we would pull them out, maybe even have them more associated with the cafeteria so it functions as a backstage, a green room for rehearsals. And if we can get it out from the 2- and 3-story classrooms above it, it also allows us to build some more height. The media center, where it's located in this diagram, is central, but we feel like if we move it just to the other side of the corridor, it not only helps fill in that very big differential between the gym and the admin, that's a very big different size and shape, but it makes it a little bit more central, a little bit more equal to all the academic rooms. The other positive impact in moving the media center, making it a little bit more central, is that we then open up more views to outside, and that is something that was not only in the visioning process, but written and articulated numerously in the educational program. So these are small moves that I'll show you the result of. The end result also shortens those academic wings. By moving the media center and the music room, we're now actually shortening and making even more intimate and kind of scale those classroom neighborhoods. So it seems like a win-win-win. On the 3rd floor, where we had a single corridor that was spanning all the rooms, it's not the most efficient way to lay out a building to just have this corridor with no program on it. So as we've shortened the wings, that also pushed a little bit of the program up to the 3rd floor. So it makes a more compact, more efficient, I would say more kind of effective and supported environment. So this is the result of that. You can see on the 1st floor, the main floor, you can see we have allocated the space for admin. We also have the same amount of space for the media center, still central. As you walk in the main entry, you now have views out to the outdoor learning courtyards, so that could be a nice element. You can also look up to the 2nd floor and see the extension of the media center. We're showing the media center split on 2 floors. That's one of the things in schematic design we'll explore a little further, what we mean by dispersing the media center, because it could be on 1 or 2 floors. And then STE space is alongside the media center and then also carried up to the 3rd floor, where a lot of the focus is on the 4th grade with the STE rooms. But it really creates that vertical hub in the middle of the school, has shortened the wings. You can see the music rooms now are out from underneath the rest of the academic wings, so they can be 1.5 story or taller space. And I'm sure we'll continue to evolve this plan, but the cafeteria is adjacent to the music rooms. The stage could move. It could be truly a backstage type of element. So this is a small evolution. There's a lot of tiny changes, like within the special education rooms, they are actually slightly better dispersed. You can see almost a pattern of how they're dispersed in each wing, on each floor, on alternating sides of the corridor, and sometimes in the middle, sometimes at the end. So it's really integrating as best it can. With some of the special education rooms, they require sensory space next to them, and I think that in the other plan it wasn't located as deliberately. So here we've made sure that we've resolved all those tiny little adjacencies that we read in the plan. So this would be our plan to take forward, and understanding that it'll continue to evolve. Schematic design is still a design phase. But the MSBA wouldn't like it if we came in later with a plan with a lot of different moves. And one of the things that we're gearing up for as we submit the PSR is MSBA board members will assemble in what they call the FAS, the Facilities Assessment Subcommittee, where the district, Carol or her designee, will present the educational plan, and then the architect, the designer, will present how the plans meet that educational plan. So this, to us, is a pretty important move to align them even tighter. And that's it. Questions?
Questions on that? Just because I can't see it, do we have these slides, or will we get a copy of this presentation?
You will get a copy of it.
Okay. So in front of the cafetorium, what is that square? What is that room?
That's the stage. So
Okay.
there are a number of ways to locate the stage. On some elementary schools, we have it on the outside wall, so then the stage might open up to an amphitheater in the landscape. Sometimes we have it just on an inside wall. As I had mentioned, if it were on the music room side, it would allow the music rooms to really be backstage, and students could enter right from the backstage. In this location, the concept was that the stage can open up into the cafeteria, but also informally, maybe it could open up or have a presence in the lobby. So it creates just another layer of presentation or options or flexibility for the school.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I just had a comment about the music room. I appreciate that you moved it out of the academic wing like that. I think that was a good move acoustically. I also appreciate that it's not part of the cafetorium, because I think they're going to get a lot more light, and I like this idea of, a different ceiling height in there too. I think that's really neat.
Yeah, if I may add, in the cafeteria, we can see, one of the things we know is it's still going to be a large amount of students for the increased population, almost 1,200, so 3 lunches is 400 students. So we intend to break down the cafeteria possibly with some dividers, but also in the scale with the ceiling. So there's a portion of the caf, there's a dotted line out towards the window wall, and we can imagine that being slightly lower height, so it creates a little bit of a different experience, and maybe clear story glass above it, so it brings daylight deeper into the cafeteria. And then the larger portion of the caf could be split up or divided. Furniture can also go a long way to change the environment, but I also think that the stage out into the lobby creates an opportunity, if it has step seating, for students that need to stay out of the crowd or could maybe function better, not in an overstimulating environment. So there are a lot of opportunities, I think, still to be explored.
That's great.
My question has to do with the gymnasium. And since all my grandkids are doing basketball, and I've been in a lot of the gymnasiums, ours as well as other communities. When we did Marathon, we opted out of providing any seating in the gymnasium. In other words, parents to go to watch their kids play used to try to pull up a chair and chill from someplace else. Will this gymnasium have enough space for some, like perhaps a 3-tiered pull-out
It'll have
bleachers?
more than enough space for that.
Okay.
But I think the conversations we want to have, we've also read in the educational program about the climbing walls that exist there right now, and adaptive PE programs, which sometimes require just storage, but also maybe some apparatus, resistance apparatus tied to the wall. So we may want to create zones. There's still plenty of room.
Yeah.
And one of the side studies we have, because it came up in visioning in a few meetings, is the idea of a walking track. And we actually found that we can take this square footage and translate some of it
Get a track around it.
into a track, but it comes at a greater expense, and would have to get the MSBA approval, but there is the square footage to still have what are the typical cross-court sizes for basketball, with a competition center court, and then an 8-foot track around the upper level.
Yeah, I could, for the kids, it seems like they're coming along earlier and earlier, or younger and younger. And I think having that facility would encourage kids to, I think it's a good thing. But make sure there's a place for Grampy to sit to watch the basketball game.
But I think also importantly is given the population of this school, I don't know what the educational plan will be around if there will be any sort of all school events or things like that. I think the
Yeah.
bleachers will become critical if you're going to put that many kids
Yeah.
in there at
No.
one point
Yeah.
too. So just from a day-to-day functional perspective too.
During the open house that the schools had in the fall, I was assigned to Marathon one of those nights, and I just walked around and spoke to a couple of folks, gym teachers. And I said, what do you think of your gym? And he goes, oh, it's great. He said, except, follow up on Mike, he said, notice what we don't have. And of course, bleachers. And he said, the reason I bring it up is that we cannot have any outside events here as far as, and I don't know how many tournaments there are for kids that are in second and third grade. We can't host any events here, which could be a revenue generator.
Yep.
So, not to beat this to death, but I'm just curious, when you're talking about all these other things, is it where you're thinking that stadium seating can be there, or it will be there, along with some of these other things? Or is it a
There's
choice?
Absolutely plenty of room for it. So
Okay.
it's a matter of choices.
Yeah,
Okay.
as I recall, in the marathon discussion, we talked about this. And the consideration was that, of course, the MSBA, this is the footprint.
Yeah.
And once you put a gymnasium in that basketball court, then we didn't have much footprint left. I suspect because of the age difference and the fact that there's 3 grades here, we get a little bit more liberal in terms of the space. Yeah.
Yeah, in this case, we justify 4 teaching stations, each is a half-court gym, and there's an
Yeah.
efficiency in getting those extra 2.
I think as I recall too in Marathon, the gym was an area of value engineering that we might
Yeah,
have
it could have
taken
been a
some of the
place where we
space out
saved
of
the
that we
people.
might have
Yeah.
been to move square footage elsewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll just, we kind of, that needs to be a priority here, I agree.
No, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think even from a community point of view, we do have HBA tournaments, so
Yeah.
it's not so much kindergarten and first graders that we're considering. They don't do a lot of tournaments, but we do have a lot of town teams that will play and use that space, so.
So,
Great.
I have a question about the design. It looks to me like the current design assumption is that each floor will be a different grade. And the reason I say that is because of the way the special education rooms are spread out throughout the design. It looks like there's one wing that's really lacking them. And I was wondering if you could talk to that.
Sure. The assumption is not by floor. It actually could easily be by wing. And one of the reasons that the lower wing has a little bit less special education is that basically there are music rooms and there are the nurses suite and other things that are at the head of that wing. So it stole a little bit of the ability to have as many special education rooms there. This would still represent very good disbursement, and I think for the most part, all of the room sizes are the same, so there could be the ability to swap out a few things, to look at the lens of by floor or by wing to see if there are enough special needs support.
Yeah, I mean, the reason it stood out to me is because in that bottom wing, it looks like the special education rooms are all at the beginning instead of being part of the wing itself in a way. Whereas in the other ones, it seems like they're surrounded by their peers constantly. And so if we're talking about the flexibility to be able to decide on a grade per wing, it seems like that wing is actually then less integrated that way. I mean, like you said, yes, we have the ability to change which classrooms will be special needs, but it might be something to think about.
Yeah, something we can look at.
I mean, some of the specialized programs are per school, not per grade, so it's not necessarily only paired with one individual grade. It'd be a resource for all 3 grades, and so those can float, around the building and don't need to be dedicated to a specific wing.
Thank you. Other than that, I think the changes are marvelous. It's really nice to have the music room right there near the stage. The thought of lowering the ceiling is good because we are going to need those acoustic breaks. So if that helps to bring in sunlight, that's wonderful. So I mean, I love all the other changes that were made. I was just concerned about the one.
Okay, any others? Well, thank you for that update. We appreciate the continued work on that. And so I think are we going to leave?
Read, yeah.
So moving on with the things that are in the PSR, there is also a lead checklist and a letter from us, from the designer, stating how many points or what our intention is to basically hop over the, which I think is now certified level. It used to be silver, a number of points to get the 2% reimbursement. So that's pretty much, I'm positive that's something you want to get the 2% reimbursement. So we, as a matter of course, took a shot at putting together this checklist. This version, there'll be another bite at this apple as the design is refined. We have to submit this again at schematic design. So as we refine, we'll redo this chart, and as we learn more about how this is actually all gonna end up at the end of schematic, that'll be more of the points that we put forth to MSBA. But their interest again is just that we are going after the 2% and that we are going to make the certified level. So this slide here gives you an overview of the different categories. Site and transportation and location are big ones here. They're two different categories, but really all site driven. There's 27 points in that category. The other real big one is energy. Energy conservation is a big one here, and that's 31 points. Indoor environmental air quality and just quality of the indoor environment. It also includes daylighting, acoustics, thermal comfort, all those things that make the indoor environment. That's the next biggest at 16 points. And then there's materials, which in water management, which are kind of tied at about 12 to 13 points. Water management is just exactly what you think it is. It's using as little water as you possibly can is the lion's share. And materials is picking the materials that are either low VOCs and or sustainably sourced or sourced nearby. So, and there's more to it than these, but I'm just trying to give you a kind of a high level overview of what's in these. Regional priority are the things that are important to Hopkinton. There's actually a chart in the lead manual that has all the zip codes across the whole country, and it tells you the 3 or 4 things that they say are important to you. And so we took those that they told us, and you get a few of those points because we'll make it to some of those. And innovation is just where we either exceed thresholds or we do something really great with one of these other points. They give you extra credit, or we have like a learning thing or something within the building, or we have a new thing that we come up with that we put forth as something that would, like an environmental justice might be something that, an example of something that's not in the lead checklist that we might decide is important and push forward, and they'll give you, that would be an innovation point. So for this project, site and transportation and location, you probably would guess that you might not score great on this one, only because undeveloped properties in suburban areas tend not to do well in this category. This one rewards urban developments in the middle of a city next to services and on bus routes. So it doesn't really, they're very difficult to get these points. So you don't get too many of those. Water management, we find most of our projects that the number of fixtures at elementary level affects the points, because once you, and this is a weird, odd thing about LEED, it's similar when you air condition a building, you get more energy points, so you would think the opposite. This one, you have more fixtures, you get more points, kind of. So if you're in a high school situation where you have showers, you're able to show that you're saving more water. But at an elementary level, you don't have that You only have the sinks and so the mathematics of it don't work in our favor. But we usually see getting 3 points in here of the possible 7, which is generally what most projects get. Irrigation will affect this as well, whether or not we choose to put irrigation in or not, that will affect the water management. Energy and atmosphere we do very well in. MSBA drives the commissioning now where they do actually provide pretty much the full enhanced commissioning for the building, which is 6 points right there. And then they have their threshold for energy performance for the buildings. The maximum points is 16, their threshold is 14. So they're pretty much getting you almost to the top anyway with theirs, and we feel like we more than likely here, if with a geothermal system, you'll get 16. But I think for our purposes right now, we just show 14 in our chart. Materials, those points are tied to the construction process. A lot of those things happen in the construction process, where we tell the contractor in the specifications to target certain things, where those materials come from, how many environmental product declarations we get, and what other kinds of materials that we want them to use. They're supposed to track that. Construction demolition is in here as well as in building reuse, and those are all tracked by contractors. That's something we chase those points. We want to get all those points. In the end, that comes down to the construction process. IAQ is occupant comfort in a nutshell. Daylight views, systems controls inside each one of the rooms. There's pre-occupancy strategies that we use as well, and this is where the selection of materials is important. So we would have all low VOC paints, low VOC, non-formaldehyde adhesives. That's where this stuff comes into play. And that's where we like to focus a lot on this one, because this is really important. Building flush outs in here as well. Pre-occupancy air testing, those are all inside this. So this is one of those categories we like to try to really get as many points as we can. Innovation, as I mentioned earlier, is really excellence in any point category. And regional is specific to you. So this tiny little chart you probably can't read shows where we think we are. So we think that we are at 61 points, which is really just the cusp of gold. So we would probably say that you would be comfortably in silver with this. So really when you do this, you're not sure, you're submitting this to LEED for them to go through this, and then you have to basically prove all these points, and it is likely they will deny some of these points when they are finally submitted. So at this close to a goal between gold and silver, I would probably say we would be in high silver right now, and that's what we would end up getting. This does not take into account, we did not take into account here any net zero or any kind of renewables or anything that was a cost driver that we will talk about during schematic design, because there are certainly points here that you could, in theory, buy by putting solar panels on the roof, or other power purchase agreements, or there are other decisions that can be made that can push this up. But this would be like where we would bring it in right now. We get you the 2%, and it would be a kind of a baseline of like a high silver.
Or also, in addition to rejection, sometimes when you're in construction, not all things work out the way it was intended. We may have substitute equipment, we may have different variations, so sometimes you lose a point or two between the theoretical design and the actual implementation, and that goes back to the review and the rejection that Dan alludes to. And so in the middle column there, it shows 24 points that are still available and potential that are certainly not in the no column. Some of those will be future conversations, as Dan alluded to, some of them tied to other decisions you guys make about the scope of the project.
Are there any examples where during construction, as you just explained, where you would gain a point or two?
Yeah, the one that I would probably push the contractor on is the environmental product declarations, which is a 2-point availability, and we only show 1 and 1 right now. 1's pretty easy to get. You just need to get a certain number of declarations. The second one is much more difficult to get, because there's an interweaving of materials that you need to prove, and that one I would certainly want to chase. But that one would be you'd have to get the contractor to make sure they give you the right data in the right way, and that they're careful about, and us are all careful about the products that we're picking.
And what would be the advantage of getting to gold if we were to get there?
Bragging rights.
Okay. So no monetary. Okay.
That's it.
2% in silver.
No,
that's-
your plaque is gold colored.
Yeah.
It's silver colored.
Right, yeah, you get, once the MSBA used to be silver, and then they changed it to allow the step behind that certified if you also beat the energy code by 20%, so that there's like, yeah, so there's a bit of a change in the way they've done it, but, we'll meet that for you because that's 2 percentage points, which is a lot of money. After that, it's really just about, the plaque on the wall.
Yeah, some of these they end up you depending on where the project is, you fall into certain things. Like if you're in an urban project, you may just fall into gold because you get so many points just because of where it is and what you're doing.
Right, reusing brownfield
Reusing,
sites,
yeah.
reusing, downtown accessibility of transit, all those things.
I mean, here I can only see that maybe what we would, if we do decide to go net zero, that'll push some points up just by making that decision.
Now, it's my understanding the LEED people are different from the MSBA people.
That's
The
correct.
LEED is an organization that the MSBA depends on that you meet these goals or you don't. LEED tells MSBA they did or they didn't, then the MSBA assigns your cash or not.
That's
right?
correct.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's-
so it's the LEED people that we're focusing on.
Yeah, there's 2 programs, they don't dictate which one you have to go to, so LEED is one, the other one is New England CHIPS, a collaborative for high-performing schools. And most projects go LEED, that's more, I'd say 80-90% of ours go LEED, sometimes we do CHIPS. And again, that depends more on the project itself, some may lend better to score in one category versus the other, but it's an independent review. If you didn't get your threshold, there's an ability to appeal at the end, sometimes with a monetary application, but you only get one appeal if you didn't get rejected on things, so you gotta make sure the resubmittal is correct. I think we had to resubmit a few on Marathon that were questionable, and then we were able to get them in the end and make sure we got the appropriate score.
How does this points tally compare to the marathon school?
That one would have been silver too. Back then the program was silver, so it would have been in the 50s range. I want to say that one was close to the bottom of silver. I think we
fought
had
for
to
those
we had to
points.
resubmit to get the qualification, so we were low 50s on that one. And it evolves. Same with the stretch code. Every year the building code upgrades, LEED upgrades, the MSBA program upgrades, and so you can kind of get caught in a hard spot or a good spot depending on which version or which iteration you're in the program for.
Yeah, I would imagine that building probably didn't get the 6 points for enhanced, probably got 2 points for commissioning because MSBA's previous program
Weren't
did not
enhanced.
do
Right,
those
right.
things.
Yeah.
So now they're paying to do the enhanced commissioning, we get the extra 4 points.
That's a good point.
I was thinking that if someone just looks just purely at the numbers, they might want to see an improvement. So that was the reason.
If you looked at it on a pure standpoint, it looked like you're not doing as well, but the base, the floor keeps rising dramatically, so that's why people used to go for gold and platinum, and now like today's silver was platinum from 5 years ago, right? So the metric keeps rising. Any questions on LEED or sustainability? Now we've talked a lot about the net zero stuff, and we're going to bring that back. I know that came up again at the select board last night, wanting to understand the premiums and things associated with sustainability, and the design team will do a life cycle cost and come back with more information on that this spring and summer for you guys to make recommended decisions on that.
Jeff, I think at the,
In fact, John,
we did a post commissioning with the marathon school. Does MSBA do anything regarding that? Does that help us in any way?
So there's 2 post commissions that you're referring to a second. So the MSBA has the 10-month comeback. So as part of their program, they require you to do a post commissioning, verify how the systems are running, do you need to do tweaks, how did the data trend out. That's part of the scope. They also, with you guys, I think, was the start of their new program where they're reaching back to the facility directors, I think a year later.
I think it was a year later, yep.
There's another post thing that they've added in. They've now recently added that to all projects. I don't think it pertains to any of the sustainability stuff, but it's more about just making sure the owner is happy with the finished product and that the designers aren't selling them things that they don't know how to use. And so that was more about I think, feeding back into the system to make sure that the end users understand all the bells and whistles that come on these new buildings and that you're maximizing them. And so I think that was more of a verification of an education for the individual districts, and then rolling that information back so they can have the next generation of facilities understand that. Do you agree with that?
I think Norman has a question.
Yeah, thank you, John, through you. One of the groupings that I think you listed has to do with site environmental sustainability considerations. And I'm wondering if you could speak briefly about what that really entails specific to our site, realizing this is not a brownfield site. I would like to hear if the idea that we are dealing with an uncleared site has any advantages for us.
From the site and from the location and the transportation, there's two different sections from the site. The first one is the location and transportation one, and that the only thing we'll be able to get there is the electric vehicle, which is going to be code required when this new code comes out soon. So that's going to be something we have to do anyway. So that's the only one we took. There is a potential for adding bicycle facilities, but that requires, as I recall, a shower be added. Which is something that usually is like a stumbling block, because you're okay adding the bike racks, but you're not necessarily at these age groups looking to add a shower for them. So it's that one usually I see doesn't get done. And reduced parking, which I don't think you'll want to do here either. From a sustainable sites perspective, that's the second piece. The site assessment, which is there's a whole bunch of things we have to look at and give them, like a survey would be an example of that, and then phase 1 is another example. There's 3 or 4 different documents they want to make sure that we looked at the site very thoroughly, and that's a point we'll definitely get. The second one is to protect and restore habitat. We won't get that because we're going to be knocking down a forest here, so we probably we won't get that point. Open space we'll get because the site is quite large, and that's just a calculation for amount of how much open space we'll have, program space. And that can't just be forested space, that has to be program use space around the actual building itself. I think it's 30% of the space has to be open. Rainwater management is one that we typically get. That's using bioswales and different kinds of natural ways to deal with the water the runoff. The heat island reduction we usually do not get. That one is, they are looking for you to put canopies over parking or change the colors of the parking lots and the walkways and sidewalks, some percentage of that. We don't see clients chase that very much because it's costly. We put that in the maybe. Light pollution reduction, that has to do with not putting light into the night sky. That one we always get because most every town has an ordinance about that anyway. So we usually get that one. Site master plan, the site master plan point, you have to achieve a certain number of other points to get that. We're not sure since we're not 100% sure, one of those maybes has to flip over to the green to get that. So you have to have 6 of these other ones. They have a list of them. And I don't know, we're not sure we're going to get all 6. Joint use of facilities only simply means that the gymnasium or the media center or the CAF or one of the facilities in the building, you are going to allow the public, the town, to use it, not just for school use. And I'm pretty sure that is your intent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to be conservative at this point about what we take. And some of those, if one of those yellows that we have there flips, like I think the one that's blocking the site master plan is the heat island reduction, which I don't know if we would get, and that's why we have both of those in that yellow category.
Would it change if we added solar canopies?
Yes.
That's the
That would
canopy that
count.
would count towards it?
Yep.
So there's some of those decisions about full net zero,
That's how we begin to
Yeah.
affect this. Yep.
Okay.
Does the proximity to the wetlands affect the score?
We lose a point because we only lose the point because we're running a road through, we have to run that road through the buffer zone. And the requirement is that you cannot disturb anything within, I think it's 100 feet of a wetland. And so we can't get that point.
All right. Well, thank you.
Sure.
So we'll move on to cost. So we do a little laptop switching.
Play musical chairs for a second. Cord doesn't stretch that far.
I'm too scared to make it try to stretch that
We
far.
don't want to go out again. Tim will have to go back to the room.
Yeah.
What happens then? All right, so cost. In the MSBA PSR report, what you're going to see is you've seen our previous cost table that we presented at your forums and the select board and the school committee respectively. This is the MSBA's table, which is data is all the same, but essentially just lists the project down the side, the square footage, obviously the code upgrade that was smaller, but all of our new buildings are the 176,000 square feet. They just want the dollars per square foot for the new building, the site broken out, the total construction costs, and our estimated project costs. So this is the table that'll go in front of you, and then we highlight our recommended preferred option here, which is highlighted in red at the bottom of option HR7E. And then there's a couple of footnotes related to it. So there's no new data here, but just wanted to show you this is a table that will end up in the report that just differs from the table that we've shown you. The same number here is that high end of the range, the 174 million, which matches the number we presented in the other table. What I wanted to start to talk to you about tonight was the MSBA's new template. So there's going to be too much to absorb here, so don't get frustrated, okay? The MSBA periodically updates their program. In December of this past December, they voted to change the reimbursement rate. They increased it in some areas, throttled it back in others, and produced a new table that has all kinds of complex formulas in it, which I'll kind of briefly touch on here. They all occur on the right side of this. So we enter the data in this left column B here, which is the column we're going to be. Column B, and then off to the right.
Turn off.
It's moving, it's not clicking. Maybe I gotta. Come on. It's funny. Well, technical difficulties. Let's go to the old mouse. No. What'd you do?
Sabotage.
Let's close the thing. All right, well, let's see if we can. All right, well, off to the right here, as I try and get over there, is the MSBA's formulas, which.
Is your clicking working at all?
Yeah, I mean,
You're,
it's totally-
if you click on Excel again, it looks like you've got another spreadsheet open that might be frozen.
All right, yeah,
Is it gray one?
yeah.
I think that's killing you.
So you better save those changes, Jeff.
Still not working. All right, let me see if I can relaunch this.
All right, I'm out of ideas.
Try it again.
We're 5 minutes away from restart your laptop.
That's right. I always thought that was option one. Reboot.
Well, let's switch back.
That's right.
The what?
Go help them out.
Yeah.
It's also more than likely that there's just too many formulas in this spreadsheet. Your computer's like smoking.
It's freaking
No
out.
pressure, no pressure here. Different computer.
Perkins computers are better than the
Something's fine.
Vertex computers.
There it is.
Sabotage me on the way over. All right, so same spreadsheet and computer. So everything off to the right here is the MSBA's complex formulas. I won't bore you with all the detail of it, but whatever we enter in the yellow spits out a formula. Oops, too sensitive. Over here it tells us like if there's scope excluded items from the OPM or designer fees, they would back charge that out, and there's a little formulas here. Each one of these bubbles tells the user what to punch in. So this is the more conservative approach to the budget, answers some of the questions about what's the effective reimbursement rate. So we know we start off at 44%. With the MSBA lead credit, that gains you another 2, so now you're up to 46%. And then they rate Tim on how well he's actually maintained his buildings and give him a score between 0 and 2. So we'll see what Tim gets. For the moment, I plugged him in at 1.5.
Stings a little.
That's fine.
At least you got 1.5.
So that gets punched in down here. We figure out our score. You know, you'll probably get closer to 1.75 or somewhere there. Maybe Tim will get 1.95. We'll see.
I don't want to brag.
See. And then that spits out your rate would then be, you know, somewhere between 47.5 to 48 would be the ultimate, you know, reimbursement rate you guys have. I enter in the design enrollment of 1,185 students with 3 grades, the size of the building. Now these are all subject to change once we get to the end of schematic as we refine and tighten things up. The students won't change, but the building will change. Below the line here is all the contingencies. So as I noted, we carried the more conservative 6% contingency for construction. That's $8 million at the moment. And then 3% for the soft cost contingency. So you can see there's $12 million in contingencies in this number that total the 174. So this, like, as you saw in the rolled up number, you were at 174 million. This is the actual granular detail of how I got there and how we dialed the 30% markup back to 28.8. And this can certainly be dialed back, you know, based on decisions we're going to make over the next couple of months. Thanks. So the details here. This is your original feasibility budget of the $1 million. We throw in some money for legal fees. You'll negotiate a contract with the OPM. Right now I just put in the MSBA standard 3.5%. We'll work on that number when we get to the schematic. So before you set the budget to go in front of town meeting, you'll negotiate with us and we'll negotiate with Perkins for you, and you'll know our final numbers before that point. So I left the more conservative 3.5 number now. Don't get concerned by the numbers. We punch in money for some estimating, advertising, permitting, owner's insurance. This is another number that's jumped a lot lately since the cost of buildings went up. The cost to insure the replacement buildings also went up. So that's kind of an astronomical number. I'm hoping that number comes down. It used to be in like the 50, 60,000 range. The last couple have been in the 200,000+ range. So I should go 225 for now. Other admin is just some various costs that you could take on for other outside consultants. The designer, I put in the MSBA standard 10%, again, just as a threshold here. Some various breakdowns there. The biggest one was the geotechnical and geoenvironmental. So this would be dealing with your soil issues as well as your geothermal consultant, should you choose to include geothermal. If you're going CM at risk, we carry a CM pre-construction fee, so I plugged that in at $300,000, assuming the duration for this project and the size of the job. You know, it's probably more market rate. We paid a lot less in Marathon, but that was also, you know, several years ago in a smaller project. I punched in all the data from the backup estimate that we had, so our project costs for construction is $135 million. There's some other various costs for utility back charges, testing and inspection. If there's any swing space, this number may go away completely. It's just a plug now for this point. And then moving expenses. Lastly, we'll get to this in detail, but the FF&E and technology, the MSBA reimburse on a per pupil basis, which is $1,200 a student, but that doesn't buy you all the needs that you have to fully outfit your school. So we need to pick a number that we're ultimately comfortable with, and we'll work with the design team consultants. At the moment, I put $1,600 for technology and $2,100 for FF&E. We may be able to dial the FF&E number down. Technology number, I think, is probably right on.
What is it used for the student count at $1,200 a student? Is it the build for?
It's
or
the,
is it
it's the bill for, so
Okay.
it's 1,185, which is our larger enrollment. So all that totals, 162 million of cost, and then there's the $12 million of reimbursement. The MSBA's formulas and their updated formulas will then kick out what the non-eligible items are. So the biggest change that happened in December is the previous amount they would reimburse for the building was $360 a square foot. Now they upped that to $395, but they also then throttled back some of the site cost reimbursement, so I still have to do a comparison of what the old formula was to the new formula, because I know that question will come up. But for today, I put in the new formulas. So what that essentially means is that your building, which cost you $767 a square foot to build, MSBA stops reimbursing at $395. So you see right off the bat, they're only paying for half of the construction costs. You're going to get more on a percentage basis on the consultant fees, but on the construction cost, which is your single biggest driver, they're paying for half what it costs to build your building. And then when you multiply that by your reimbursement rate of 47.5%, you start to see how you're landing at a 25% effective reimbursement rate versus a 47% effective reimbursement rate.
Can I just, terminology wise, so their cap is $395 for construction costs. So they're not paying half. They're only reimbursing on half of the cost, right?
And then they're paying half of that because
they're paying, no, but I mean, important distinction, right? They're not paying half of it. They're only reimbursing on essentially half of the construction costs, and then that so they're paying, they're all again paying a quarter basically.
Essentially it's a quarter.
They stop computing their reimbursement at $395.
Right.
Correct. And the change they made 2 years ago was that when they upped it to a lot of it's a balance, right? And they're trying to make the metrics look better, that they're keeping up with the market conditions. So this time they kind of moved the site costs down. The last time they went after the soft costs of the consultant fees. So they used to pay the designer and the OPM 10% and 3.5% respectively, regardless of what the construction cost is. Now they cap that out at 3.5% and 10%, have a cap of $500 a square foot. So there's another step in between there. And so things are going up and things are going down, and that's a response to how they're trying to work the numbers, statewide, to motivate, where the dollars get attributable to. So you don't need to know all the ins and outs of this, and I will review this in detail when we get to the final one, but I wanted to start to have you understand. There's things that are categorically ineligible, such as swing space or moving costs. So those would go into they're not paying for a bucket. Same with legal fees would not be in that bucket. But obviously the biggest way you can impact your project is the dollars per square foot of the building, right? And so the discussion on CM versus GC, will be an important part of that, because they're paying up to the $395 or $393, and so obviously if you're going with construction manager, there's a higher separation than if you're going with a general contractor. So it looks better when you go to the funding request at town meeting with the ratios. Your effective reimbursement rate will start to go up more because you've removed some of the top cream, if you will, in the overall cost of the project. The other things that I put in here is the MSBA, their newer format here, has entering in your ineligible building square footages. Again, I took the more conservative approach. At the moment, they noted that the breakout spaces are ineligible at $2,700 square feet net times a 1.5 grossing multiplier, which means that essentially 4,000 square feet of that hallway they're calling ineligible space at the moment. Now, we'll work with the MSBA and try and justify and push and pull on that number to get that to a lower number before we get to the end of schematic design. So that should be reduced to some extent. They've called out the storage in the gym as ineligible as 115 square feet there. The admin and guidance is slightly over at 121 square feet. And then the library books room and the family resource room at 900 square feet. And again, all these are times the grossing multiplier. So you see that all these things can add up. In this case, it's after the grossing multiplier, it's 5,600 square feet of your 176,000 square foot building is also ineligible. So if we're able to work these numbers down, that also helps with the ratio. Again, they're paying for the foundation, and if we can sort out the stuff above it, it helps with the overall story in town. So ultimately what this means is that from a PURE's number standpoint, I think a safe floor number is essentially, $44.9 million of reimbursement on this theoretical 174 million, and that equates to about 26% at the moment. So long way of getting to the answer 26%, but I want you to understand, because you're going to get asked this a lot in town, and it's just not straight. Right, this is about as curvy as a road as you can take to be able to explain it to the general public. So 26% now, and that number can certainly go up based on all the decisions you guys make. The net zero, the geothermal, all those things are above that 395. So it just creates a wider separation from where they stop reimbursing to what you decide is the appropriate program that the town wants to move forward with. So I know that's a lot. I've been taking the questions on that.
And what percent does it cap out at, Jeff? 40%? Is there a cap to the percentage, 40?
Yeah, your reimbursement rate is 47.55% at this point, depending on how well you score. And then that multiplies through against the pure cost, which is they break out the contingency separate too, because there's kind of I call it the more or less guaranteed money, which is above the line, what it costs to build the building, all the consultant fees that you intend to spend most of, right? And then there's the two contingencies at the bottom, which you may or may not spend. If you were a betting person in this current market, you're going to carry more, like I'm showing you at the moment with the 12 million. A few years ago, I would have carried a lot less there, and that. So it's really just how much cushion do you want after town meeting, because other towns, and I think Dan and Bob can attest, and certainly Chris and I, we've had to go back for more money, we've had to use ARPA money, there's had to be all kinds of things that happened in 2022 that we hope all of us it's behind us, but you could go with a bigger cushion and just explain that to the town if that's where you want to go at town meeting. And that comes into the conversation about tax impact, which came up at the select board meeting, last night, what's the tax impact? We want to be clear with the public, if we're putting those bigger balloons in there to cushion our landing, we want to let them know, even though we put in 174 million, a couple of it is a reserve contingency. And, part of that's about messaging, so that when they see their tax number, their eyes adjust to what is expected versus what is, protective.
And we have a pretty recent example of where with Marathon, we used that same reserve contingency.
Right, with Marathon, you had a great story on that where the original number was 45 million, and then we went back for the addition and got another $1.5 million, and then ended up coming in under the original appropriation and never needed
With
$1.5 million.
Yeah, with the addition.
But we went back for the more money because at the time we just started construction and thought we needed it, and we were able to deliver the project under the original budget with an addition, in construction. That was a great story, in terms of the timing and the dollars and the cents that were appropriated on that project.
Any questions, comments on this spreadsheet that we'll all become very familiar with? No, I think the other thing I would say in regards to this, from a community perspective, is when I have found from the previous project is when you start to get into the discussions of the minutia of MSBA reimbursement and what they will reimburse, what they won't reimburse, there tends to be sort of there can be a negative hue to it, where, well, why won't they pay for this one? The bottom line is what Jeff just shared with us is that the MSBA is potentially going to give us over $40 million reimbursement for this project that the town is not going to have to bear as a cost. So no matter what their formula is, I think it's just important that we keep reminding the public of that yes, maybe we could argue about whether or not they should reimburse on the whole library book room or not, but it's $40 million that they're giving us. So I think that's the message we really want to keep going out there to with the public.
Well, and I would say, not to convolute it, but the 15 million in savings of them allowing us to add the grade into that building
Absolutely.
as well. So it turns into real money.
Yeah. As long as you get those Couple points.
1.5.
That's right.
I have one question. You mentioned there were a lot of changes in the last couple of years. The MSBA went up on some, went down on the other. Once this project is up and running, if they change anything, we're stuck with what we're locked in with.
So
what
you're
we
locked
have.
in with whatever generation of the program you were at the
Okay.
time they gave their funding vote. So, projects that submitted in January are in the new program. Projects that submitted in November for the December board
They're in
are in
that
the
one.
old program.
Okay, thanks.
And so there's always that cycle of where did you land? And, if you know it's coming, you can time it, but they purposely don't tell you when they're doing their updates so they can avoid people
they don't.
timing it.
Yes, they do.
Sure.
Now, one question that could come up is, how can we get even more than 44 million? So, just something to think about, prepare for.
That will definitely be asked.
So, great question. I don't want to answer it, but no, it's the couple of things that we need to look at, and the sustainability team from the design team presented. There are other programs out there with the IRS, whatever the program was you presented in December, where the federal program is now reimbursing large sums of money, and they've added municipalities in there. That still needs to be vetted out. That was voted by the legislative at the end of last year, and like anything, it needs to be sorted through. By the time we're well along in design, theoretically all that is sorted out, so there may be an ability to get more money that way. How the MSBA decides to handle that is yet to be seen, right? Because if some of the numbers that Dan had presented, Dan, the sustainability guy, had presented was, substantial millions of dollars. And so the MSBA, where it's an Eversource reimbursement of a couple $100,000, they've let you keep that. But if you're talking millions of dollars, they may do an adjustment to their program based on third-party funding. The earlier iterations of the MSBA program, if third-party funding came in, you both shared in the savings. And so years ago, whatever the Eversource rebate was, the MSBA and the town both respectively dropped their rate by that amount. And so if it's millions of dollars, they may go back to that. But I don't know. That's all theoretical guesswork because none of the details have been sorted out. But the good news is it would still be a benefit to you, but you might share in the savings depending on what that program yields.
Get in fast before they get to figure it out.
Yeah, right.
And as a follow-up, when we get to where we're making some decisions of choosing this or that, regardless of what we're looking at, will there also be another column showing the impact on the reimbursement? So whether we choose to go with geothermal or something different, or choose this school design or that school design, will we always be kept up to date along the way so that can factor into our decision?
Wasn't intending to, just because of the extent of the formulas and we'll be working with order of magnitude costs, right? It'll be like life cycle costs and big picture things. I mean, certainly the mantra of whatever decisions you make are lowering the amount the town is taking on. So the pot the MSBA is providing is kind of a fixed bucket, and what you're doing is just changing the ratio of the overall number. So the foundation that the MSBA is paying is always going to be generally consistent regardless of those decisions that you make, but the delta the town picks up will go down with each decision you make that brings the overall cost down, if that makes sense.
In a simpler way, you're going to change the percentage, but you're probably not going to be changing the dollar value as much because the decisions you're making at that point are above the caps in a lot of those instances.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you spend, simple terms, if you have $1 million and you spend 100,000, or you're going to get 100,000 back, you're at 10%. If you suddenly are spending $2 million, but you're still only getting $100,000 from the MSBA, you're at 5%. So it becomes how you look at it. You've made the decision that you want to spend that extra $1 million of money, but that's not going to suddenly translate to your keeping your effective rate because there's fixed caps within the system.
I understand that on the way up, but I'm thinking on the way down, if we make some cuts in places, how that's going to affect our potential reimbursement.
It's still this, because of where the caps are set, it's less likely,
Okay.
but there are a lot of decisions that need to be made You won't cut this back to $395 a square foot.
No,
Like
I know
you-
that.
So that's like, that's, so until you get there,
Right.
it's,
Originally, and 15 years ago when they started the program, those decisions would
Yes.
be effective, and what you're asking would make a difference. But the gap is double,
Yeah.
right? So you're never going to cut the cost of your building by half, because even a charter school can't really be built for $395 a square foot.
So, I mean, almost what you're saying is that, and I know it's not exactly calculated, but that dollar amount you showed on that spreadsheet is pretty much the dollar amount we can be expecting, and the reimbursement percentage will change because the total cost will change, but that's.
Yeah, from a
that's-
public.
We're not adjusting that 40-some million dollars.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, historically, I've never given you a finite number like that, because people latch on to, like, I heard 45.5 million,
Right.
but it's still a range, because the MSBA is still reviewing your program. We've had conversations with the school department of whether we would make reductions or tweaks to the square footages in different areas, and so that can have an impact benefit, because you're having less square footage. But it goes both ways, that multiplier, if it's less ineligible square foot, it helps you. If you happen to tighten up the overall building, it drops together, right? Because you're having a smaller building, so you're getting less money. So if you're getting rid of square footage, getting rid of the ineligible square footage is more beneficial than just tightening up the building. But because of last year's pressures, we had to reduce the overall size of buildings in many towns after the MSBA had awarded the contracts, just because those projects needed to come in on budget to move forward. And how that still plays out, we don't know yet with the MSBA, because they haven't done their amendment to adjust for the fact that the towns had to reduce the size of their building to keep within the budget. More to come on that, I'll let you know when that plays out.
Well, thank you for putting that together and introducing that. Definitely helpful.
So I think that we've covered all the elements that were in the PSR. A draft of that PSR was sent to you on Friday, and a link over the weekend with some of the exhibits. The next step would be to get your approval to have the OPM submit on your behalf the preferred schematic report to the MSBA, which we'll be doing tomorrow, and then we can talk about next steps in new business after that.
Are there any other questions or comments on the PSR and exhibits that were provided previously?
I have one fast question.
Sure.
So our choice wasn't on the original list. It's still not on the original list
No, it's on.
intentionally? HR 70? No?
Sorry.
And I didn't know if that was on purpose, because it
No.
wasn't there originally, and then
Sure.
later on in the document, you say it was something that wasn't originally presented, and adjustments were made, so I wanted to make sure.
Page? No, it should be on there.
What page is a great question, and my computer died. I should have written page numbers, didn't think I was gonna have to go back and forth.
Dan and I are still scrubbing it, so
Okay.
I appreciate any
Yeah,
comments.
no, I just want to make, I'll find it if you want to have somebody else. Or do you want me to ask you my other couple
No, go ahead. Yeah,
short
ask the other
ones?
questions. I mean, we'll continue to look at them if there are revisions that need to be made further. I mean, that's partly what we're-
It's tiny, but I just didn't know if that was intentional, and if there was a good reason.
No, it
could be.
sometimes we took exhibits from the past presentation,
Yeah.
so it,
Okay.
Could be,
if we
depending
pulled
on
it from
where
the
it is.
meeting on the 13th.
Page 4.
Okay, page 4.
Are you talking about the evaluation table that we use?
It's the list of sites that
Yes.
were initially presented. It was at the beginning of the document. I can't remember what page it was.
Yeah, it's page 4.
Okay, and is
Page 4 of
it
3.1,
HR 7? E is not on that list?
HR7E is not on
Okay.
there. It's a list, it's a bulleted list. And then again, on the image that was embedded below, which is section 3.3.3, page 4.
I guess if I had 7W, I should add 7E.
Yes.
All right, yeah. I mean, it's
No,
like
no, it's
minutia,
important.
but I
Right
just,
now,
you know.
it's
yeah.
important.
Right,
Important
okay.
change.
That's a good
Okay.
one.
I mean, we picked it, so I
One
think
you
it should
didn't
be
pick.
there.
Yeah, the one you didn't pick
Good
was
eye.
Throw it in there.
Good eye.
All right. One other question. This, just in reading this came up, and it might not be relevant to the PSR, but when we talk about the water lines, this fascinating document of construction that I've never read anything like this before in my life, so it was, but, given that there's a chance that our water system may change, does that have any impact on this, or is that totally separate and irrelevant to I mean, how does that play? Do we have any thoughts
So
on
right
that?
now, we run 8 or 9 wells in town that give us all our water. We have our water towers up at the middle school. There's talk of the town going to MWRA. Norman could probably answer where we are with that or if we're moving forward, but I guess that's your question.
Yeah,
Does it
I mean,
matter
I
if-
imagine
where
it's
our water
two separate
sources?
things, but I just, as I was reading it, the water section was so thorough, and I thought, all right, if we change our water system, is that gonna matter?
I don't think from MSBA's perspective it would matter. I mean,
Not from theirs.
it's really just a matter of the pipe going, I think, ultimately, it's the pipe that goes from the school to
Right,
Street
from the
to
line
Willoughby
to the
Hayden Road,
school,
I think no
right,
matter what.
yeah.
And
Right.
Yeah, we're
that-
tying it to the same
So we'll be tying
infrastructure.
it to the
So
same
you-
thing.
You know, the connection to MWR
So
would
it
happen,
shouldn't-
quote, downstream.
Somewhere
or
else.
upstream,
Yeah.
You know, from wherever we are.
Okay.
In the grand scheme of building it, impacts, you might have filtration depending on the quality of the water that you have now versus the water you have then. You might have a pressure difference. Those have ramifications for a building, but in the scheme of a $174 million project, it's probably a drop in the bucket,
Okay,
pun
okay,
intended.
all right, cool.
But the pressure point and, you know, the quality of the water are important things to keep an eye on if you're changing sources.
Okay. All right, two more short ones. Sorry, I won't monopolize the time here. The whole payback section that was in page 51 to 54, that got brought up last night at the select board too, so I think that it would be awesome if we could pull that out. I know it's preliminary, but that section where it kind of says, all right, in this many X number of years, you're gonna recoup X number of dollars if you decide to go geothermal versus HVAC. So that I definitely think is huge and has come up over and over questions wise. And then the last, well, there's a little thing, the blue highlighted sections in the end in 3, 3, 4, and after that, are they highlighted as part of the document, or was there something? Okay,
No, there's
okay,
some-
so
yeah,
that's on
that's the
purpose.
reason,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. All right. And then tonight we just quickly mentioned about the gym use, and then I did notice that it does say in the PSR that's not intended for extracurricular use. Do those two things jive? Is that how it? I don't know how that.
What's it in?
Where does it say that?
I want a page number because the section about gym use is not intended for extracurriculars. Somebody else have that open that can search for it more easily than
Oh,
me?
I
I'm
think
sorry.
what that might
ed
mean
plan?
is, yeah, that's an ed plan thing. And that
It could-
might mean that they're talking about like school extracurriculars like basketball or some kind of sports,
Okay.
not town.
It doesn't have any
Like,
bearing on other things.
School indoors.
Yes,
Like
yeah.
the high school has a basketball. court,
Right, and they use it for a
example.
school program.
Okay,
But
okay.
it wouldn't be like
It-
for a rental if
Right.
the town wanted to use it.
Yep.
Right.
on the
And again, it could be minutia, but I just, when you submit stuff to the state, I just don't want anything to come back.
Jesse had, he did certain them.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you. Other questions? Norman and Leah, anything from you?
I'm all set, thank you.
Not for me, thank you.
Okay, then, seems like we might be ready for a motion. Jeff, good?
Yep.
Okay, so we are seeking a motion to authorize the owner's project manager to submit the preferred schematic report to the MSBA as, we're gonna make an edit on that?
Subject to any minor modifications through the chair and us.
Right, subject to any minor modifications through the chair and OPM.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Motion by Bill, second by Mike. We are roll call. Leah?
Hi.
Jagrut?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
Tiffany?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So unanimous, 6-0.
Congrats. Big milestone.
Absolutely. Nice work, everybody.
So who's gonna carry this 800-page document?
The printer.
Is it like those bid packages? We have to have like 20 printed copies?
Do you really have to print it?
No.
They have been asking,
Really do.
yeah. They,
We used to always print, literally
used
the
to always
deadline
do,
used to have to be in their door by like
Yeah.
4 o'clock.
with the binders.
Then they realized it was like
COVID stopped.
COVID happened and they stopped
Yeah.
acquiring,
Yeah.
and now they're creeping back.
Yeah.
As opposed to
They're
just
good, yeah,
reading
they're-
it on their computer.
I know.
Creatures
They're gonna
of
do
habit, for
anyway.
sure.
Like
This is
it's
much better.
2023.
It just
they
goes
could
in a
just read
file.
it.
They're trying to
They
save
never
costs.
look at it.
Yeah.
Fighting Kevin. Okay. So I think then the next item to talk about is upcoming timeline.
Yeah, and then we have one other item. Yeah, so let's do that. So hopefully you can see that. It's the same format. So we kept a rhythm here of every other week meetings. We were suggesting skipping the next cycle, or letting them, the design team, do some heads down work on the floor plan. We'll be engaging with the MSBA at their facilities assessment subcommittee, at which point Dr. Kavanaugh will be presenting and defending her ed program to the board as they pick it apart and for all its glory. And so that'll be a meeting that'll happen either in mid to end of March, depending on which slot we have. They have a regular meeting cycle. And so that'll be where we put our focus in responding to their comments, and we'll get their comments back by the end of March. So we were assuming that this group would want to get together around March 28th. We were sticking with Tuesdays every other week off of yesterday as a cycle. We targeted a community forum for early April. This is just a placeholder, can be at any time. You know, we wanted to show the town the preferred option and the form that it's ready to be presented in. So on the 28th, the design team will present any updates to you, and then that'll be ready to go to the main public the following week. So that's a date that we're floating out there. If that's something we want to socialize, we should pick that now, so that if we don't meet again until March 28th, we know when we want to meet. There are other things that obviously timeline will be important for that presentation, what to expect, when we're going to make certain decisions, you know, when we're going to talk about sustainability and contractor delivery methods, you know, so part of that public presentation will be the outline of what's next. In early April, we would, you know, get back in front of you guys and talk about the design updates. You know, we'd be zeroed in on the wetlands impact, you know, through the winter, have a good understanding of that. We'd be able to present the MSBA comments. The end of April, we may have a touch base on traffic. We're going to talk about that in a minute. He said he needed 3 months to do that, but it'll just be probably a touch base as to how things are going, but not the final report yet. We've covered kind of the MSBA costs here already, but some of these are just placeholder topics. I was thinking the next community forum after that would probably be early June, kind of before the summer break. And so that could be June 7th, could be any time in June you guys want to jockey around graduation and other dates. I did not cross-reference the 7th with anything.
I think graduation is June 2nd.
Yeah.
Okay.
Job, Joe.
So we could pick that, and then we would have your meeting on June 20th, kind of break there. Probably the next one would fall on July 5th, so likely not have a meeting that week. But we would need to decide when we need to have a conversation. In early July or in late July, the things that happen in July is you would have made your decision on the CM versus general contractor. You'd made your major decisions likely on some of the mechanical systems, and we would then start the pricing exercise in July. So the design team would need to release the drawings for estimating in July. Takes us about 3 weeks to get the numbers back. We then review and edit those, and so in 4 weeks we're ready to present it to you guys. The MSBA wants an update 2 weeks before the submission to make sure that you're on track with your budget and that what you're going to send them in 2 weeks can in fact be submitted and approved. You would make an approval at that point, and then we would start a similar run of meetings in August with the school committee and the select board to have your recommendation on the scope and schedule and budget, and then present that to those other two committees for endorsements. Probably closer to the end of the month here. These white dates will probably shift much closer to the 30th to give you guys a maximum amount of time to kind of work through it on your benefit. The decisions that'll be made will be when the school is opened. At the moment, Carol, I've kind of lined that up for an April vacation, and we could certainly go earlier to February. and maybe even December, and we're gonna work through the details now that we know where the building is and which site. We'll work through that between now and the end of this summer to make a recommendation, and then that is how we'll log the overall cost based on what we think the construction duration is. And once we know the final program of the project, we can dial that in. I know it used to be taboo moving in over breaks in most towns, like everybody wanted to hit the summer, but then you're fighting for the same labor pool. And so many towns have, gone into the decision of let's get it in as early as possible. And so that's, we've had a lot of success moving in December, February, and April breaks in other towns. And so we're ready, geared up to do that when the time comes. And then you submit the end of August, so by the 31st, you'd be approving us just like tonight to then go ahead and submit. It goes back to the MSBA for their processes. They'll go through that budget that you saw me present tonight, kick the tires. We'll be doing some negotiating on your behalf, really trying to argue over those ineligible scopes and trying to maximize the benefit for the town. That'll take over the course of September. And then at that point, we'll know what the reimbursement number is, but the MSBA will vote it at the end of October. But we'll kind of know with good numbers that we can go around, do a road show, presenting to the public. Here's the final cost, here's the final schedule. And it's just pending the MSBA's board vote. And then we would look to have a fall special, potentially in early November. And that obviously needs to be worked out with the selectmen and other pertinent bodies in town. So that's the road ahead. Questions? All right, so the near-term road, we talked about not getting together for a month from now, and one of the things we need to do is move forward with the traffic study. And so here is what's left of our current budget, our $1 million. So uncommitted funds is about $77,708. Some of that will need to be for miscellaneous expenses, marketing stuff for leading up to town meeting and a few things like that. Maybe some miscellaneous expenses, but the only big consultant cost left is the traffic study. And so this town, wants a robust traffic study, and so we've received that proposal. Chris and I are still reviewing it, but we have that to talk with you about tonight. What I think I'd like to do is get a not to exceed number tonight, and we can talk about what's in this proposal. So that everybody's comfortable, and then we'll come back and finalize it, but I want to get him started on the important things. And so there's a couple of things in this traffic study proposal.
Jeff, can I?
Yep.
So before you do, can we just wrap up? I think the one thing on the timeline though,
Yep.
is that potential next forum.
Yes.
And so I think before we move on to traffic, can we just lock in?
Yes.
So you had proposed April 5th. I know that you and I also had a discussion where you proposed that maybe we want to do that one actually entirely virtually.
I thought to switch it up to see if we can
switch it
gain
up.
more, because we know with certainty that the YouTube channel has picked up more attendance than the physical
Yep.
attendees. So
Right.
if we can provide another vehicle that can go directly to people's phones,
Yeah.
we may find more coverage.
Yeah, and I think it will be, if we do it virtually, even for the people who watch it following that, it's probably better packaged for somebody to watch on YouTube when we do it as a virtual presentation.
I did just notice that date is a Passover holiday.
Yeah, so
Yeah, so we will.
Yeah, so that might be,
Yeah.
work around that, yeah.
But I think general time frame wise, I feel like that's probably a good time to do that type of presentation because, it is, there will be a greater focus on kind of budgets and capital, et cetera, as we approach town meeting. So that'll be important to have that in as part of the discussion, even though it's not being considered at this annual town meeting. So I do think that makes sense. I think we just need to land on a date where we're not conflicting with the holiday.
Right. So Passover runs the 5th through the 13th, so we could go back to a Tuesday, stick with our rhythm, the 4th, and pick up the night before. Or you guys can pick a totally different date that works to your benefit.
I mean, I think the 4th. Yeah, I think that probably works just as well as any date. I know it'll probably conflict with a select board meeting, but we're doing it virtually, and I think especially in the April timeframe, we're not gonna find a night of the week where we're not conflicting with select board, school committee, or appropriations, so, if there are no objections, I think we target that.
Yep.
So changed.
Alright. Then I think we can move on to traffic.
All right, so we'll title this as virtual and recorded for now.
I'll watch it from Savannah.
Take me with you.
We're gonna have you host it from.
So in this traffic proposal that we just received from the design team on, Monday afternoon, and we're still in the process of reviewing it, so we hadn't sent it out as part of the packet. There's a couple of things that he attended additional meetings and responded to additional stuff already, and so the task one has to do with some of the additional counts and observations he did at the Hopkins School, as well as the additional meetings that we brought him to and additional forums. And so so part of that's that already established stuff within this proposal. What we're going to focus on today is what he's offering to do moving forward. So it's a transportation study for the larger 2 to 4 grade enrollment at the Hayden Row site. He's looking to collect additional data layered on top of the data points that he already had. There's a graphic here that shows what that is. They'd be using turning movement counts, so a camera that kind of picks things up at the rush hour time of between 7 and 9 a.m. and then the afternoon school commute of 2 to 4 p.m. So to date, they've already collected data in and around the high school area, in some locations, the middle school driveway and the high school driveway, and then Marathon. So those are the blue dots here that if you guys can all see on the screen here, that's where they picked up data. What they're proposing to add are the areas in red, and so one would be at the little end of Hayden Row, as they call it, intersection there. Chestnut Street on the other end, and then bookending it on Main Street. We'd had some conversations over the course, do we pick it up at Pleasant or do we go all the way down to the Main Street and Pleasant Street? So, from my standpoint, the Pleasant and Hayden Row, or Pleasant and Grove rather, is an important one, right? If we're looking to trim costs or not, we can decide the value of spots 1 and 2. But I think at a minimum, 3, 6, and 10 as presented here are important for us. And so we just need to decide, do we want the bookend to end at Pleasant and Grove, or do we want it to end at Main Street at these 2 locations?
So I'd be concerned about, it could be a little skewed on Main Street with the corridor project going, right? So I'd be a little concerned about, what actual numbers we're getting from that. Yeah.
I think you've got the corridor project, and then I think realistically, right, what we're doing here is we're proposing moving a school from a location that has a pretty big impact on those 2 points to a location that will have a significantly less impact on those 2 points. So I'm not sure that the data on those is going to be hugely relevant to us. We know that the cars that are going across from Marathon to Elmwood, the buses that are going across from Marathon to Elmwood, they're not going to be anymore.
Right. So from my standpoint, and I agree with you that, we want to frame the arrival, right? So we know at the intersection of Chestnut, there's not other roads that then feed into it. So that's a main point. And same with the Hayden Row leg and the Grove Street Pleasant. If you get those 2 intersections, you've picked up the 2 sources on one side and you've picked up the other source on this side, so that we could potentially eliminate spots 1 and 2.
Yeah.
But he put that out there because there were questions that came up at the forums, and he made statements that we could go down to Main Street. And at the time, I was worried about all the same things that you guys said, that you're gonna introduce extraneous data that you then have to explain what that means to the overall process of the school you're trying to build.
To Tim's point, the numbers we get on Main Street and Pleasant Street aren't gonna mean much, because the day after Marathon Day, they're gonna start tearing up that crap again. So people will try to avoid it. So we're not gonna get realistic numbers. And that starts the day after Marathon Day for next.
And both of those points
That's right.
funnel through zone 3 here. So you're gonna get that data.
I was going to say, that's the thing. When we talked about getting sort of the end-to-end data, by making that our observation point, I would argue we are getting that.
Right,
Like,
you're-
you have to get there from one of those 2 places. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So again, and what we want to get out of tonight is an authorization to proceed to get him started, and we'll come back with an updated proposal based on the feedback that we're collecting tonight. He also talked about doing an additional observation to collect data at the middle school, high school, and Hopkins. So he collected it already at Elmwood and Marathon. He did some ancillary observations at Hopkins, but to also include that. So it's 2 additional field observations, one during the morning and one during the afternoon, to observe the flow of the driveways at the middle school, high school, and Hopkins. So then that we've now collected the full complement of schools, right? And so that's an important data point as we move forward. Existing traffic volumes, expand on previous existing condition studies identified in task 2.1. Future forecasting, so that's just an important part of his tool, so that's a necessary item. Trip generation assignment, again, these are kind of the more technical pieces of the things that he has to do. Future considerations and traffic volumes, he's got to project out based on the enrollments in the build and no build. So this always comes up, and this is a planning board question too, just what happens if the rest of the world freezes and there's just our project, and what's the reality of our project with the rest of the world? So answering those kind of questions always comes up during the permitting process. And then operational analysis and a report. So those are all the things that are necessary and important to the project. And that's task 2. That's the biggest portion, or half this proposal. He also talks about conceptual transportation improvements. Remember, we've talked about making recommendations for our project and suggesting things that could improve other portions of the Hayden Row corridor. And so that's what this item is, and it's an allowance of $7,500 that we can talk more about. But it's, as noted earlier, the improvements will be grouped into 2 categories: those that are part of the new project and those that could be considered by town independent of the new school to improve the traffic flow and safety on Hayden Row corridor. So I think we'll always be asked that. I think it's good to spend some money to get be better equipped to go to town meeting. Access and planning for circulation. This is part of his design support effort of the vehicular access, pedestrians, parking, egress. Those are a natural part of his next steps. And then meetings and communications, because traffic is probably the single biggest conversational point. It's meeting heavy with this consultant, and so we've talked about including 8 meetings. We've brought him to a few community forums. You've brought him to your meetings, and we know, when we get heading up to town meeting, we'll also want him at some of those. So all these things add up to a dollar value, of course. So the previously kind of spent work, the work that we asked VHB to do over the past couple of months is the first dollar value. That's the $9,000. The $36,500 includes those 2 intersections that we may eliminate now based on tonight's conversation, but it's really the bulk of what he's doing, and that's part of the normal traffic study that you would see. Item 3 is at $7,500, where you're really projecting beyond the school project. Design support is the item task 4, 3,000, and then the number of meetings and attending all those and prepping and being part of them is the $8,500 there. So this all totals $64,500. And Perkins has graciously agreed not to put markup on this because they know we're tight on overall budget. As I noted, we have $77,700 left uncommitted, and this would use up the bulk of that, leaving about $13,000 for any miscellaneous expenses. There are no other outside consultants that we need to add here, so I think we're comfortable with the running out on that amount of money with only $13,000 left. But I just want to put that out there for conversation, and we will tighten up this proposal based on those 2 intersection reductions.
Is that enough public meetings?
How many did you have in there?
8.
I had figured you would want them to go to the 2 community meetings for sure, a select board meeting, probably a school committee meeting, and then here at least twice, and then I had 2 floaters.
Yeah.
That would be for something else that you might need.
It's a lot.
What's that?
What
It's
do you-
you said it's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we're going up from that number.
If we don't use the 8 meetings, let's say we have 6 and we don't use the floaters, is that like?
Yeah, we can
Money
convert,
back?
like, the other items I'd say would be a lump sum, but task 5, we can do it on a per
lists it
meeting
that way,
basis,
yeah.
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 He lists it as like he tells me how many hours are for that.
We-
So we could,
We can also choose to, if we want to keep more money in the contingency, reduce that now, but have a per meeting unit price as an option as well.
I'm wondering too, do we ever have an example where school committee and select board are meeting on the same day? Does that ever happen?
I mean, they do joint meetings. Occasionally. Well, they do, I mean,
Or
they do
joint
joint
meetings.
meetings, and it feels like this would be a good opportunity for a joint meeting for this presentation, so you could probably shave one off, but, I mean, my feeling is 8 is more than sufficient.
Yeah.
I'd be comfortable going down to 6, and if we could even get those as sort of more à la carte, we'll pay for them as we use them, that would be better.
That's why we'll reduce it to 6 and we'll get a per unit, per meeting basis.
And was the floater, were you assuming the town meeting, or was that already allocated?
I
Special
assume the
town
two
meeting?
town meetings were in there,
No,
in the
he
8.
means the actual annual town, or the.
Oh, the
funding.
annual,
Yeah, the special.
that could be.
Which could be, that's another option, or if we bring them to a strategy meeting or things
We
like
said
that.
2 floaters, so one of those floaters could
Could
be
have
the
been
special
that,
town
and then
meeting.
something
Okay.
could have been another one in between if you decided in that period to
Okay.
have another
There
public
may be
forum,
a-
you might need him. or
There may
want
be a
him.
town-specific meeting where he meets with the DPW or other groups within town, so that fits into there as well.
Again, I think we can we'll just try to do is be as efficient of shepherding those as possible, right? If we can, but I can't see more than 6. Like at a certain point.
It's a lot of talk about traffic.
I was gonna say, at certain point,
Yeah.
like, we know traffic is a big issue, but at a certain point, all the questions are answered and everyone at this table is gonna be able to repeat back everything he's gonna say, so.
And all of those meetings will be taped, I guess, well, almost all.
Depends.
But most of them will be.
Yes.
So for those who really want to dig into it, they'll have plenty of opportunity to see the same answer over and over and over.
Leah, you have a question?
No.
And then I know Norman, you do too, so we'll go Leah, then Norman.
Okay, my question was more about the buffer, the $13,000. I know when I run projects, $13,000 can be gone through really fast, and we're suddenly talking about extra meetings and other possible contingencies. So you do have a high comfort level that that's an okay buffer to have?
The $1 million is all that's appropriated, right? So we're essentially working within the number, right? So both, Perkins and Vertex, took discounts to get to that point. And so we understand there's no money left, so we're not coming back for extra money to get to town meeting, right? Should the town delay the project or things like that happening, that's a different circumstance, but since you gave us the 2 votes, or the other 2 supporting boards gave their votes to support the project, we don't foresee that, and that's why I have a high level of confidence. If there was a longer debate or an antsiness of those other boards in town, that may jeopardize the schedule, then it'd be a different conversation, but it seems that everyone in the town understands the need to move the project forward in an expeditious way. So I do think it's enough, because there's not other consultants that we would really take on at this point, because there's not enough money even to bring on jump-starting things that would come later. You could do more investigation work, and we do that in other towns. If you had more money, I would go back and do more borings. That's one of the things I would prefer us to do, but there's not really enough money to really get that remobilized and do a substantial amount of additional investigation. So we'll just wait for the town meeting and get the additional funding for the next phase and then move forward with more field work. So it's a long-winded way of
thank
saying
you.
I'm comfortable.
Thank you.
Norman?
Yes, thank you, John. I'm wondering, and Jeff, you may clarify this for me. We're talking about 8 meetings focusing on traffic. Does this include also the permitting phase, or this is purely design?
Purely, this brings us up to town meeting, so no permitting, no design. So this brings us to town meeting, essentially, so everything beyond that would be part of the future appropriation.
Okay, great. Then my next question has to do with the observation points. Because the traffic study will entail the origin destination surveys, I think it may be beneficial to include the points that you identified as points that could be taken off. That information is going to be helpful going forward with the design of the project. And which then brings me to my last point. I noticed there's a technical distinction between this particular project's traffic impact relative to the site and the general traffic impact or existing traffic patterns on Hayden Row. I think by the end of the day, from a PR perspective, it may be necessary to see the two as one project. I think the more we try and push the traffic considerations and confine the discussions to the specific site, I think we'll lose the public.
So, Norman, I agree with that to a point. It gets back to this doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? So I completely understand your point, which is that the perception of traffic is going, the more, as much as we tell people, no, we're just focused on, they don't care. I think the thing that gives me concern about what you're suggesting about thinking about them as one project is that this study and its somewhat expansion is going to provide information to the town and to the district about other things that could potentially happen to alleviate traffic, but we don't control that, right? So we can't do adjustments up Hayden Row near the high school as part of this project.
No.
That we're not, we can't, and so my personal fear is if we tie these two closely together, this committee doesn't control the execution of some of that other stuff. And so if we tie it together and, I'm just going to say, like, the select board decides to defer something that we think is necessary to help traffic along Hayden Row, that's out of this body's control. And so that's the concern. I think there needs to be a broader conversation at the town level, speaking just mostly as a citizen, about traffic along Hayden Row. But I'm a little concerned about the breadth of how much it's tied to this project. Go ahead.
I absolutely agree. Norman, one of the key deliverables from this transportation study is going to be a document that suggests these are things you might consider to do. And that'll go to the planning board, that'll go to you, that'll go to the town engineer. It has absolutely nothing to do with the school. Now, the school is actually paying for this. We asked them to do that, but that's going to help the town. And that's about as far as this committee can go with that. Like John mentioned, we took care of the traffic situation down on Elm Street, and now we're addressing the situation up on Hayden Row Street. We can't fix whatever's wrong with the high school. The traffic guy can make suggestions, and you guys can fix it, okay? This committee can't fix that. As John said, this committee can fix what's related to this school. And we actually went above and beyond to ask this traffic guy to give us the suggestions of what he can do to improve Hayden Row Street. We know how well that went 10 years ago. I suspect it will just as well today. But, that's what you get.
I think, Norman, your point, and I'd be happy to participate in a conversation about this, but it almost feels like this is a conversation that has to happen with the select board, right, about how we want to use this traffic study.
I think it feels a lot like the whole school study versus the Elmwood study that we did with the feasibility phase, right? We have to be careful to not get the financials all blurred together, because some of it's reimbursable, some of it isn't. So even from a kind of budgetary standpoint, we have to think of them as two separate things.
Yeah. But I think ongoing, we need to make sure that information is being fed, much like district-wide study is being fed back and forth so that because at a certain level, the town voters are not gonna recognize, yeah.
We can only control what we can control.
Other thoughts on traffic? We're all gonna be
Question
traffic
on the-
engineers by the time this is over.
I had a question on the proposal.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting that the items that were presented in the proposal, these are out of scope? Because from the meeting, last meeting, I thought these are items that are just being pulled up in the schedule, but would have been done anyway. So I'm not sure how it eats into the contingency.
Yeah, no, great question. So in the original proposal, they were excluded. So this is Perkins baseline. So what was included in the first proposal was a basic traffic analysis, including counts at both Hayden Row, and including our base proposal, a full traffic study and analysis of the campus would come at a later date. So the traffic counts that they had done to date was part of the original one, and Perkins, because they didn't know where the building was going, purposely put that out to a later date when we were negotiating the overall initial contract. So that second tier, the real report itself, was deferred until this point when we could narrow in where the traffic counts should actually go. Because if it was at Elm Street, we would have used different roads, different intersections. We may have gone different directions with those the traffic counts and the data.
I guess the question I have, if you go back to the spreadsheet that shows the money and how it's been allocated, yeah. And maybe I'm just not reading it correctly, but where's the line that talks about the campus study? Is it named differently there?
That's not here. You mean the district-wide study?
Yeah.
That's a different appropriation.
So none of those assets are being used for this?
Correct.
Okay.
No, he's right.
Oh, he is?
We have to rebalance. This is a broader conversation, actually.
'Cause I thought last time
It's in there.
you mentioned it was, and
It's currently being paid for out of the other account, but I think it's reflected in my numbers here. I think it's within this.
but my bigger question is there was 80,000 approved, and I think the last time we looked, only 40,000 or 42 was appropriated to you folks. Maybe you can just update me on those numbers.
Yeah, so
That's what I'm
the
confused.
district-wide study, that 41,500 is in the other number here, so thank you, Bill, for bringing that up. There's a reconciliation I need to do with Susan and the MSBA right now we're still only showing $1 million here, but technically this would be $1,041,500 to that point, so there's actually 41,500 that is still available once I resolve that accounting issue with the MSBA.
So
do we
it's
have-
100 and,
So the 47 is actually, the 77 is actually plus 41.
Yeah.
Okay. So we actually have around 50,000 reserved.
50,000,
Yep.
yeah.
Now, would that be enough to consider doing borings or other things like that, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Dan and I can talk about, what makes sense to, what gets you the best value out of the remaining funds in the
Yeah,
budget.
because there were a few different things that you could do. Another one being the soil conductivity testing for the geothermal system is another one you could do now.
Right, if you were looking to really go forward with geothermal, you could actually install your first well and then determine the conductivity of it. So you actually install one well as a test well, and then determine how effective that well would be on this particular property. So that is another item we could accelerate forward as part of the project.
That would not be part of the contingency because that well ultimately gets included in the.
That's correct.
Yeah,
So
it'll be used.
the future well field would just clamp on to that well head that we install
Prepaid,
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
so what do you need from us tonight?
A head nod.
So at some point, will you come back with a more refined
Yeah, so I
proposal, and do we need to approve that, or because it's within?
No, you need to approve it. So this is a
Yeah.
pure additional service. In an ideal world, we would have got you a vetted proposal. You could have voted on it tonight. We did not get you that. So what I'm looking for is a verbal agreement that you understand what we're going to release at risk, to have the design engineer move forward with. And what I heard tonight is the only things we're tweaking from the proposal is to reduce the intersection 1 and 2 from the equation and to reduce the number of meetings. And then Chris and I will finish reviewing the rest of the details of the proposal, and we'll come back to you at the end of March, and you can vote that in as in a proposal. But in the meantime, we'll get him started based on the understanding of the committee that you want to move forward with the broader study.
So basically barring any objection from anybody here.
Jeff, did you want to set a not to exceed number on that, or are you okay, or are we okay with just a head nod?
It's up to you guys. Like, I didn't get it to you in your packet, so you may not feel comfortable with the not to exceed number, but if you want to take that vote, certainly would help solidify things. I guess I'll look to Dan to see whether it matters to you or not, but.
Probably would help.
What would you set the number at?
His max
That
proposal, I would
proposal.
say.
His max
We
proposal,
don't know what he's gonna, we would be guessing if we just decided to take the 2 meetings out, and I don't know what exactly they are. So it would be the 64,500.
Well, everything you're suggesting to him is a deletion.
Yes.
So it's not to exceed.
Yeah,
right?
so you
it's-
wouldn't exceed that.
And then we'll come back with a formalized proposal and contract amendment for you to then vote the final value.
Okay.
Norman, your hand's up. I don't know if you just still have it up from last time or if you have another question. Okay, I think that answers my question. Okay, so you would want, in this case, a vote to
Authorize the traffic engineer to proceed with the traffic study for a not to exceed value of $64,500, subject to the design team coming back with an updated proposal.
Somebody want to make that motion?
Chris got all that.
Got the first half of that. Motion to authorize the traffic engineer to begin work subject to a future revised proposal.
Motion for the traffic engineer to proceed with the study for a not to exceed value of $64,500, subject to an updated proposal brought back before the committee for approval.
My experience with the problem with not to exceed numbers is invariably it ends up about that number. Because even though we know, the other 18,000 people in town know that number as well, and the traffic guy's gonna know it. So he builds a case to come up to close to the not to exceed number. I don't mind spending the money, but I'd be more comfortable to get them started tomorrow and say, give us $20,000 worth. And then the end of March, we vote on the balance. I want them to get to work, but I'm just uncomfortable by saying that we're not gonna pay you more than this. Automatically, I'm thinking if I'm the contractor, that's what I'm gonna charge. I'm comfortable with that, but, I don't know. I don't know what the rest of you folks think, but.
But don't we have to approve the final after you negotiate
the
with
final
them?
amount.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
I understand your point. Appreciate it. I mean, we don't have to tell them that the committee even appropriated the number.
I didn't
We
tell
can-
them.
we told them we need a revised
That's what I'm
I told
proposal
them I needed a
based
revised
on the
proposal.
comments you gave,
That's what I told them.
but we don't want to wait a month.
Because I know
to
you'll do
release
the
it.
work.
Yeah.
We can wait for the revised proposal to give him the go
If you're
ahead.
comfortable that he's willing to start
I
work,
think he's
not
watching
knowing
right
that.
now.
I mean,
No, I don't think
I mean,
he
he's not gonna, I mean, between now and March 28th,
28th.
he's not gonna do close to $64,000 worth of
No,
work.
No,
so-
he's got some things he would like to start now, so.
All the physical
For sure.
traffic counts and all that. that'll
Counts.
happen.
So in that case, to Mike's point, I mean, maybe this vote doesn't even make any sense. Maybe they go back to the head nod, which is just get him started. We're comfortable with that, and we'll get a revised number.
We'll vote on the 20th.
Is he comfortable to start on a head nod, Dan?
So on the flip side, will he work if he doesn't have
Yeah,
a
I was gonna
contract?
say,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's, I don't know
I
if
just
that's
wonder
a.
if like,
Take a
I
fee,
know
net fee reduction right now to do it.
if we're saying take those 2 traffic points out on Main Street, take off 2 of the meetings, I mean, like, why don't we just knock $2,000 off ourselves? It's probably gonna be that, right? Like, I mean, not significantly lower it, but at least somewhat. If there's 8 meetings, right? Like, right now he's charging us for 8 meetings, it's $8,500, it's like $1,000 a meeting. We say we want 2 less, can we just say not to exceed 62,000? $500? That seems reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing we could do, right, is
It's
that,
gonna land right around there. I mean,
Yeah,
at this
yeah.
point, I mean,
Is
that-
the 64.5 number, like, we know, I mean, I guess we could say, I mean, we're gonna be approving, because the point is here, we want the work between now and when we vote the proposal not to exceed a certain number. If, to your point, if we come back with the slimmed down scope and the proposal is miraculously $64,400, I think we'll all be sitting here saying, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess I'm struggling with like, what's the right way to do this motion to,
Can we approve a partial scope? So just approve task 2 and
So can I jump in for a sec? I'm very comfortable accepting the not to exceed amount. I feel like Vertex and the designers work a lot with this traffic consultant. They have a feel for how much he charges. They have probably made a very good faith estimate on the amounts that he would charge. And it feels unlikely that he would be able to inflate too much without our partners going back and going, what are you doing? And in the face of $1 million that we have just spent, if there's like a $2,000 variability in the traffic study that he is conducting, I mean, I think that's well within the margins of error, right? Like, he might have to spend an extra hour. He might have found that, like, something takes a little longer. I guess I'm not predisposed to thinking that there might be an attempt to take advantage of us in this situation.
So he's proposing that it's a lump sum, right? So the lump sum includes tasks 1 through 4, right? We know that we're essentially accepting tasks 1 through 4, except for the reduction in the 2 parking counts on task 2. And to Tiffany's point, we know we're reducing the meetings from 8 to 6, so we know where it's going to land, essentially. You know, that it's in that $62,000 range number. So we were suggesting the $64,500 not to exceed, because that releases him on the whole scope of work, gets him started, but he's still going to give us an updated proposal in the meantime. And you know, before he puts boots on the ground, he's going to get Dan his updated proposal, so that Dan can actually release him.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's significant risk to the committee from that standpoint.
so you're suggesting the most straightforward way is to just go with the
Not to exceed approach and release the work.
not to exceed of 64.5?
500, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, yeah.
How does that proposal get approved? So typically we approve the proposal at the next meeting?
Yeah, so at your next meeting, we'll bring back the updated proposal with a contract amendment.
With an amendment.
Number 3 or whatever we're on.
Yep.
So if we're approving a not to exceed number, does that give John potentially the carte blanche to accept a lower number than the 64,000, or we'd still need to vote that, John?
Well,
I think
everybody can see-
we still need to vote the contract amendment anyway.
Okay,
you have to vote the
Because
amendment.
we're not approving the terms tonight. We're just
Yeah,
approving
it'd
the
be the same
work
way
not
if
to
the
exceed.
motion was to approve a member of the committee to
Yeah.
act on your behalf with the not to exceed amount.
Yeah.
It's the same approach.
Yeah.
So we're back to the original discussed motion of commencing the work not to exceed, and forget the wording, but the thing Jeff said about the not to exceed 64.5. So does someone want to make that motion? Can you read it again?
Jeff will tell me if I got it right. Motion to authorize traffic engineer to proceed with a study for a not to exceed value of $64,500, subject to a proposal being brought back and accepted by the committee.
All right.
I think you just say so moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion
I'm doing
by
the minutes,
Tiffany, Second by Bill. The reason I had him read it off the monitor was so nobody had to.
I'm like running away over here.
Okay, so motion by Tiffany, second by Bill. Roll call vote. Leah?
Aye.
Jack Root?
yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Mike?
Tiffany?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. We are unanimous, 6-0. I believe that brings us to the end of our agenda. So if there's nothing else anyone wants to raise at this point, I will seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Tiffany. Roll call vote. Leah?
Aye.
Jagrut?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Mike? Tiffany?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so we are adjourned at 8:13 PM with our next meeting scheduled for March 28th, right here at HCAM.
Same
Thank you,
place.
HCAM, for broadcasting as always. Thank you and have a good night.
I think we need
Thank
to.
you.
One, two, three, four.